Hello, hello, family. I am Isabel David, and we are going to invite Mr. Here we go.
All right. Hello,
Here's,
everyone.
yes, this is here Jason David. He is, and I am the founders of Triumph Global, a spiritual community all over the world. And we're here to create context in the sense of your questions being answered via spiritual questions, via relationships, via business. So if you have a question that you'd like to have answered by from the spiritual community by Jason David, who has a plethora of knowledge. You know, he's been here with us for 3 years as far as broadcasting in Triumph, but he's been a pastor and walking with God since he was 14. So this is a safe place for your questions to be answered. I definitely want to encourage you to go to Facebook at Triumph Global now and submit your questions. You will see a message button up at the top. Go ahead and click on it, and your questions will be submitted right to my phone. And with that, we'll schedule you or the question. If you want to be a part of this segment, we definitely would encourage you to do so as well. So today we have a great question. Are you guys ready? The question today is, how do you know? How do you know if your imagination is from God or godly, or if it's just a puffed up imagination from your flesh? And I want to provide some nuances, because the nuances include, let's say, if you want to you have a God, you have a purpose, you believe it's
Right.
from God, and this is your imagination. You're thinking, okay, if I get this hospital, that's a godly imagination. You know, I'm receiving this hospital. But what about if it's more, we know very obviously, like, if I get 500 Lamborghinis, that's my imagination. I want to be wealthy and I want to receive, I'm seeing 500 Lamborghinis. That's a little bit more obvious that we could say that's from our flesh, right? So I want to kind of give the family a little bit of nuance to know, when is the imagination from God, or when is it from your flesh? How do you know it inside yourself?
This is a beautiful question. You know, when we ask these questions are truly not questions of when do we know, but these are questions of permission. These are questions of existential permission. And these are questions that, you know, when a child may be still immature, all adults are children that stop growing. But being an adult doesn't mean that you're mature.
Right.
So we must have an understanding of what maturity is. And but with that said, when we're children, when you have a child that is learning from a place of, um, let's say, loss and reward. If I do these things, I have reward. If I do these things, I have loss.
Mm.
Then sometimes some children will then have an impulse that arises that says, how much of this side of loss can I do and get away with before I lose?
Mm.
How unbehaved can I be until mom truly looks at me with that look of the death gaze, or how much can I challenge my father before I'm sent to timeout,
Right.
right? When we ask, at times, we get to realize that at times when we ask, how do we know what thoughts are from God and what imagination you use? Imagination is from God, or what imagination is from, what did you say?
The flesh.
From the flesh. we're also somewhat, we must clarify that in there is not a question of how much flesh can I get away with.
Mm, that's good.
How much can I get away from true spirit before it becomes fleshy?
Mm,
So with your example, if I had an imagination of 500 Lamborghinis that I want, there's 500 Lamborghinis, I want 500 Lamborghinis, right?
yes.
And you're asking, and you're like, oh, that's totally flesh. But how many Lamborghinis is not? Is 25? Can that be spirit? How about one?
Mm.
So there begins to be, in your example, a subterfuge, a subconscious bartering with God.
So good. So good.
You-
I think like just that right there is just like, well, we're done, guys. This is so good. So good.
So what you're asking when you're asking the question of how do I know whether an imagination is from God, which you used what seems to be positive things. It seems like, oh, we like cars, we like uh, Yves Saint Laurent bag or a Chanel shoes, or Jimmy Choos. I love Jimmy Choos, or Ferragamo shoes. Well, how I want a whole closet of Ferragamo shoes. If we're using these types of examples, and then we say, well, how do I know if that imagination was from God or not? Well, the fact that you're asking if it was from God or not should already lean you to not put stock in your imagination
Mm.
in that way, because you have to we get to separate between the motivation is what you're asking.
Mm.
How
Yeah.
do I know? How do I know what imagination is from God and from the flesh? What you're asking is, how do I discern the motivations that generate imagination?
Wow.
How do I discern the motivations that generate imaginations?
That's so
See,
good.
imaginations are compelled and generated by motivations.
Yes.
So if you're motivated by spirit, then you will have spiritual imaginations. If you're
Mm.
motivated by flesh, then you will have fleshly imaginations. Come on.
That's so good.
I mean,
That's
I
so
want
good.
I want to make sure that you have time to talk. This is important for people.
It is
I think this is a great
absolutely.
question.
Yes, I think when it comes to that, then you can really get a distinction about what is spiritual, you know, and what is flesh. Definitely, especially when you're talking about Lamborghinis and you're saying it's not 500, but one or two or five or 10. It's based on what you are working and co-creating with God, right?
And yeah, and the motivation. So if
Yes.
the motivate if per your example, if 500 Lamborghinis popped up in the imagination, a sense of desire, like, ooh, I want 500. Yes, I'm going to have 500 Lamborghinis. What was the motivation? Was the motivation to personify something that you want someone to view you as?
Hmm.
Well, now you know it's carnal, not spiritual.
Right. Right.
Okay.
That's good. Right.
If it was for a guy to get a certain type of girl, a certain type of woman, and I'd rather say girl, because if you have to have a certain car to get a certain type of woman, then she's not a woman, she's a girl.
Hmm. Right. Those are great distinctions.
So, but if the motivation, the imagination, you go back and go, what influence was I under when I had the imagination? Was I in a spiritual frequency? Was I in love, serenity, bliss, enthusiasm, being led and driven by the eternal reality? Or was I being driven by the temporal reality? So if I find that once I get to the motivation, then I find exactly where it was under. I was under the motivation of people pleasing or my repertoire, what I look like in the world. You
Right.
know, this gets into certain nuances, right? Because at the same time, someone might not care anything about that stuff, but they're going to a business meeting as a counselor, as a consultant to a king, you know, and the people that mediated it say, well, there's certain protocol. So you want to have your best, you want to wear your best, okay? And you show up and you don't care about those things, but you still are who you are. You're a great person. You have the best counsel. You can solve mysteries. You're like Joseph or Daniel, right?
Right.
Guess what? After Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, Pharaoh changed his apparel, changed his outfit. First thing that Pharaoh did when after Joseph gave him the solution was change his outfit. He's like, no, inside you're greater than me, but outside you look like a mess. So we're gonna give you a new apparel, a new fashion closet. We got to put a neck. So when Daniel did the same thing for King Cyrus, King
Right.
Cyrus put purple garments all over him,
Right.
brand new royal shoes. He put the best shoes on his feet. He put some Ferragamos on his feet. Sorry, I love Ferragamos. You can't tell me that some Jimmy shoes are better than Ferragamos. But so within that context, he put the best on him, and then it says, and put gold necklaces around his neck. You
Right.
know, we have
Right.
this generation at times going plain Jane, and I notice how the millennials and the Zers are starting to wear gold chains. Even people that are not in like hip hop or
Right.
rap culture, they're wearing gold chains, and they probably weren't raised like that, but they're getting a different sense of culture. All of a sudden they're thinking about the gold chain, right? Was that from the spirit or from the carnal flesh? Well, was
Mm,
it because you wanted to be like your posse and
right.
you'll be rejected if you're not like your posse? You want to put on certain airs? Well, then it was based on the flesh. Now,
This is so good.
now, if you say those people look at people through the flesh, so I have a gold chain that I don't wear anymore, but I'm going to be around them today, and I want to share the gospel with them. I'm going to wear my gold chain just so that there's a bond. So now they got to go, oh, wait, I can't find my gold chain. Hey, I'm going to go pick one up. I'm going to pick it up just so that I can talk with these people in this community and there's a sense of identity. You don't have to do that, but you get the example. It's a
I do.
loose example. So that same gold chain motivated for different reasons, right?
Right.
So the Pharaoh and Xerxes and King Cyrus changed Daniel's appearance. I'm pretty sure Daniel wasn't. I'm pretty sure he got a nice camel too,
Right. Right.
a nice Lamborghini camel,
So
a
good.
nice, the best to ride on, right? The best
Right.
horses, the best chariots. I'm pretty sure Daniel wasn't all about that, and I'm pretty sure Joseph wasn't all about that because he had been crushed. He had lost everything twice.
Right.
So he had transcended external appearances, but that doesn't mean that now they don't put certain appearances on in certain environments because of the way people view things and
Right.
because of people's interactions. So they don't want their appearance to be a hindrance to the message that they're conveying.
Yes. Right.
Right. So now we're still talking about things, but the things are motivated by different things, by different motivating factors. So if your imagination, let's say your imagination about owning a portfolio of $100 million in property portfolio of $100 million, and you get this download of this imagination, but when you got the download, you were in a place of giving. You're in a
Mhm.
place that you wanted to solve something in the world and you wanted to build schools in Africa or in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia needs schools right now. They need materials. Um, you know, you wanted to build medical clinics for the HIV pandemic amongst children
Mhm.
in eastern and northern Thailand, or Cambodia, right, or certain areas of the Philippines. Well, and you were in that mode of getting in the vibration of solution, the receptivity of solution and co-creativity with God. And boom, you see the answer. The answer is not a program online. The answer is go build a real estate portfolio of million of 9 figures, and out of that, give 70% of the profit to that and reinvest the 30% so you can make more, so you can build more schools. And now the person is like, yeah. So now, right, and remember that things are relative to God. So we can't get religious here. Like, God doesn't have a minting press in heaven. God doesn't measure your financial bank account to esteem your worth.
Hmm. That's so important. So
So
important.
someone massively spiritual and humble and God actualized, Christ actualized, and illuminescent inner being can have a billion. Let's be better, because the reality of what's out there, $50 billion, and
Hmm.
be completely actualized, and there could be another person that only has 50,000 in their bank account, in their equity, and they're both absolutely actualized beings, and it has nothing to do with their monetary account. It has to do with their internal and heavenly accounts. And so God doesn't care about the billions, because there's limitless resources. In the
Hmm.
sense, in the context of what we talk about on the planet, there's gold that hasn't been found. There's oil that hasn't been found or tapped into. Water is free. Everything in the world is free. I want you to think about that. Everyone, think about that for a moment. Grass is free, grows everywhere. You're eating lettuce from a store if you live in a modernized, domesticated society, but lettuce is free. It grows in the ground. You're just not growing it.
Right. Right.
Lemongrass is free. You just need to find a field where it's growing, and it'll just cost you a little bit of effort. But there's no one standing there in a field that no one owns, whereas their blueberries are growing,
Yeah.
saying, no, no, you got to find the person, you got to pay for that before you pluck it off the tree. I've walked in Italy into unowned old olive orchards that have been abandoned, and
Hmm.
you can just pick the olive right off the tree and eat it. And because we're so used to buying things in grocery stores, it feels weird to pluck something off a tree and eat it and receive nurture. And you're still thinking about, I need to go to the restaurant to eat. But you just ate. You just ate berries, and you ate milk from the cow. And if you want butter, you can just churn that milk yourself. It's ready to go.
Right.
Water is free. It's all over the world. There are streams. You can go to a clean stream and drink from it.
So good.
You know,
Good.
so abundance is all around us. So your imagination, the reason why I say that is because oftentimes your imagination, number one, the imagination created by God has no limits.
Hmm.
So just because it's 500 Ferraris doesn't mean that it's carnal.
Hmm.
Oh man, I triggered someone. Just, just because it's 500 Ferraris doesn't mean that it's carnal. Maybe your brain and your imagination, you were under the inspiration of the spirit, but you grew up around cars, or you understand cars. So you said, man, if I get 500 Ferraris, and you're like, yeah, 500 Ferraris multiplied by 300K to 500K each. Okay, so we're talking a cool 25 million. If I can get it, or 17 million. Okay, with 17 million, then I'll flip that, and I'll do this, and I'll do that, and I'll gift this to that person, because they can sell that to create this with that institution. Also, there's this pastor that I love who's given so much to me. I'm going to give that to the ministry. If he decides to keep it, he can keep it. Decide to sell it for the ministry, they can sell it. But I'm going to give it to the pastor. This this
Endless.
is this is the reality. So just because it's 500 Rolls Royces, Phantoms, doesn't mean that it's carnal. It's the motivation and the inspiration of the influence that you were under. And is it based on eternal implications? Are you seeking to create an eternal impact through that natural resource? Right?
That's good. Yeah.
Some people get to realize, people are like, what? Eternal impact through natural? Yes. You hear me through natural ears, and I'm communicating eternal spiritual realities through radio waves and satellite digital dishes. We have to pay for this platform, or you wouldn't be able to hear us. So the inspiration to purchase access to a platform had spiritual, eternal implications.
Right.
but yet we still had to uh, uh, curate the platform, and we still
Mhm.
had to pay for the platform, and we still have to edit, and we still have to buy lights, and we still, oh, you guys have so many lights, who do you think you are? There's some people that might think that you spent $50,000 on lights. Yeah, because look at the production value that reduces the hindrance and engages the audience so that they can receive the teaching. Is it
Absolutely.
is it necessary? Barely anything is. Barely anything is necessary. There are tribes out there living happy lives, almost completely butt naked, almost completely nude. They barely have any clothes, and they live and die. They have their bar mitzvahs, their weddings, their celebrations, their feasts, their festivals, their sacred moments. They live all their life, no clothes, wasn't necessary in their consciousness.
It's so interesting that you say that
These are
because
just
the
examples. Don't
necessary,
go off running around in Miami with no clothes on, or Los Angeles, saying clothes aren't necessary. It's based on consciousness. Go ahead. I want to hear what you're saying.
absolutely. No, because when we think about what we were taught in grade school, what is required and necessary for you to live is air, water, food. Everything else is an imagination of making your life a little bit easier or more convenient with cell phones and
Right.
technology. Hot running water when you could actually be using cold water all the time, which
I think that's a greater example, especially for people in the West, is you don't need a hot shower. No one needs a hot shower. Everyone has been bathing themselves in cool or cold water for thousands of years, unless they had a hot spring. And I'll go further with that. A hot spring tends to have sulfur in it, and
mm,
sulfur smells. And so most people would not bathe in certain hot springs because they would stink afterwards. So they would, if they bathed in a hot spring, it was for therapeutic purposes, and then they would jump in the river in cold water to clean themselves off to try to get that smell of the sulfur off their body.
mm,
So this is key. People would burn fragrant woods and smoke themselves in it to
right,
make the body odor, kind of cover up the body odor, and they would smell like smoke or cherry wood or oak wood or sage or berry wood, because they wanted to smell not like bo.
right.
But cold. I think that's a great example. So because we're talking about the imagination. So you know when someone thought of heating water, of creating indoor water heaters for people to have this, was it necessary? Not necessarily. Are there certain benefits? Yes. There has been health benefits for healing purposes. Sterilized water, being able to boil water efficiently, the other periphery discoveries that they made around that, being able to distill water at a basis where it was more affordable to people, because still distilled reverse osmosis or distilled water is healthier at times if it has minerals in it. For the medical institutions, cleaner water, heated water, soap and water, right? Soap and hot water
Right.
cleanses better and removes bacteria and removes soils and stains better. So there were other peripheral. So when someone imagined this, well, they had a lot of benefits to it. It also created jobs in the capitalistic marketplace. It did a lot of good. They were under the realm of the spirit. Now, where can it be carnal if they were just like, it's only about money? And then they never let anyone use the IP of it, be able to have
Right.
access to invent other things from
Right.
it.
Right.
Well, most people, when they get these downloads, they start getting consequential downloads to what else they can create. So their imagination is alignment. So I always say start with the motivation, and then you go into the inspiration. What are you under the influence of when you have the idea? What is the impact radius of the imagination? Obviously, we're not talking about a basic thing, but just for the mention it, if your imagination was you're married and you were making out with someone else in your imagination, well, that's from the sinful nature.
Mhm.
It's from the bend of the sinful nature. Now, it goes into other things if it was a dream, but we're talking about imaginations. So if you're having imaginations of being seduced by an individual that's not your partner, then that is a demonically inspired, a fleshly inspired imagination. So,
Mm.
what are the fruits of the flesh? You can go read the fruits of the flesh. And whenever you have imagination that's associated with the flesh, let's say rage, rage is a fruit of the flesh. So if you're having an imagination fueled that has rage in it, it's fleshly. So we
Mm.
didn't mention this side, but that
I
because it's
think that's
based,
so important. So
yeah,
important. Sometimes you have inserts in your head where you're imagining something bad happening, right? Some
right,
like the shoe will drop or something will happen and you become worried about something. So that's a really great distinction as to what is from God and
right.
what is from the sinful nature. That's so good.
Right. So let's read it. Galatians 5:19-21 says the works of the flesh are evident. So that's why we didn't even talk about it, because they're evident. So if you
Mm.
have an imagination by being under this influence of the flesh, it'll look something like this: sexually immoral. So bent out of creativity, destructive, sexually immoral. Impurity. It will not be pure. You will not feel good in your heart about it. Your conscience will not be clean. You wouldn't like if someone knew that you had that imagination,
Right.
right? Because it's impure. Sensuality, which actually means over sexualized, fetishized, um, making the body, the flesh, the sexuality, everything rather than the soul, right? It's like
Right.
when women say they're being objectified, they're made into an object, or their sexuality, their body is made into an object. So
Right.
that type of sensuality.
Mm.
Idolatry, putting something, worshiping something or adoring something more than God. Okay, you could be worshiping your own opinion more than God. Your imagination could show that it's worshiping something more than God, or it's providing fealty and
Mm.
subservience to someone else more than God. This is idolatry. Sorcery. If your thoughts were manipulating an environment or doing charms, or what can I do, and go to the Chinese soothsayer, to the tea reader, to the horoscope reader, going on TikTok to the people that are doing these little card readings, sorcery imagination, that's under the flesh. It's from carnal. Enmity, where you're putting spite between people. You have the imagination is enmity between you and your spouse, or enmity between churches, or enmity between organizations, or enmity between nations, or
Mm.
enmity. Your imagination is about enmity. That's from the carnal nature. Strife. The imagination was strife filled. Strife ensued, filled with strife. Flesh, carnal. Jealousy, fits of rage, rivalries.
Mm.
See, remind yourself, oh, rivalry. I feel myself as a rival. That you have an imagination. I'm a rivaling this person, or they're rivaling me. Flesh,
Mm.
dissensions. This is where your um, fractions, right? Dissensions are when you create division in an environment and you
Right.
dissent against the authorities, right? Dissensions, um,
Mm.
divisions, divisions, envy. So your imagination is envious. There's a role player in imagination that's envious or was motivated by envy. Well, you just saw a woman with a certain type of shoes and you envied that she had that. And now you see yourself getting them just so that she can see you wearing them.
Mm.
That is fueled by the flesh. Or you see yourself with a certain type of car, but you see yourself with that car, and immediately in your imagination, you see yourself rolling in to someone's house or someone's invitation, and they see the car, and you're projecting, you're in affectation. You want them to know, you're broadcasting that you have that. That's based on envies. Drunkenness. So the imagination is drunken in nature. It's not
Mm.
sober in nature. It's not in reality in nature. Drunkenness, that's from the carnal. Orgies, that's from the carnal. So you see yourself with multiple people. You're having an imagination with multiple people. You're having an imagination, a spouse, for some reason, they're having an imagination where them and other people are together with their wife.
Mm.
Orgies in the imagination. This also can be mixing. This can also go into mixing certain commerces or pedophilia. God forbid someone has an imagination. These are all carnal things. They're based on the bent of the sinful flesh. And so we didn't mention these things because even how Paul starts, these things are evident. These things are evident. Look in the world and look at all the destruction that all these things cause. Look
Mm.
at this is the works of the flesh. So the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, meekness, temperance, and self-control. So if the imagination is sparked by love, joy, peace, generosity, affection, goodness, patience, kindness, temperance, self control, self discipline, moderation, givingness, opposite of rivalries, teamwork, right? If it's motivated, if it's not impurity, it's purity. If it's sensuality, then remember that word there is over sexualized based on the body.
Mm.
If it was that the opposite, sacredness around the body,
Mm.
sacredness around sexuality, but not like polyamorous type of things where they bend their conscience to see it in a way, but yet it doesn't survive. None of
Right.
what they say works, and none of it survives, and they have these scars in them later on. No, your sacredness around sexuality based on what works within morality, right? Because now you have to get to the opposite. Immorality, morality. Morality is what works, what is in alignment with God and creation and nature and the homeostasis of all things, and
Right.
doesn't produce um, destruction of life.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
That's so good. That's so good. I think you just putting that together provides a distinction for the family here, because I think when we look at our hearts and we look into
right,
ourselves regarding imagination, it's
right,
sometimes we can be aloof to what we're actually seeing in our real of our vision, our perception. So
right.
asking ourselves, is it godly, and here's the fruit of the spirit, then, and also here's the fruit of the flesh, you can bring some distinction, some contrast, and then you can uh, pray differently, go a different route, right?
That's right.
Create new routes in your mind to a better imagination, more excellent
Come on.
imagination.
Come on, that's right. Because you want to not focus on what you don't want. You want to focus on what you do want. So you don't focus on not committing imaginations of the flesh or carnal imagination. You focus on generating spirit imaginations, spirit machinations, spirit imaginations, spirit thoughts. You generate role plays because everyone sees their life as a real. Everyone always sees their life as a real. Everything you're going to do today, you see before you do it.
Right.
You see how you behave, how you walk, how you talk, how you dress. There's an internal image of self. So you rewrite that image in every point of spiritual life and spirit thought and spirit speaking, right? Righteousness in Christ, right believing is where you start. Right
Yeah.
believing produces right thinking. Right thinking produces right speaking. Right thinking and right speaking produces right action, right beingness, right? So when you have this right beingness, now you have right articulation. Now you have right you because you're generating from right role play. You're generating from a right righteous image of self, which is God in you, Christ in you, the hope of glory, the
Yes.
kingdom of heaven within you. And
Yes.
so we're living from the kingdom of heaven within because we're seeing ourselves play out who we are now as a new being by the identity shift, and so we're focused on the good. I love what you said. We're focused on the good, and we're creating from that new image of self.
It just feels so much better to focus from the good. It's
Absolutely.
absolutely feels.
Absolutely. And life, the biomagnetic sphere of us and how life responds to it only responds to what you think about. What you think about comes about. That's why Proverbs 4:23 says, guard your heart above all things, for out of it flow the issues of life.
Mm, it's so powerful, powerful, powerful scripture. Thank you so much for being here and elucidating such a powerful message and answering this question. Family, I
Thank
hope that this has blessed you. If it does, please consider sharing it with your friends and family. Also, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. It will help the algorithm. And again, if you want to get in touch with us, you definitely want to DM us on Facebook at Triumph Global Now. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you and God bless.